Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to host Pat Gelsinger, chairman of the board at Glue, for a virtual fireside chat with David Lin, SCSP's senior director for future technology platforms.
All right, good morning. Ooh, okay.
Good morning, David. Great to be able to join you virtually. Look out over the beautiful Bay Area, but still participate there in DC.
We're so glad that you could join us, Pat. We're so excited to have this conversation with you. You're a man that needs no introduction, but in case you do, I'm joined digitally right now by Pat Gelsinger, the former CEO of Intel Corporation. But now he's also, after stepping down, he's also now started a tech startup, creating a social media platform, and Pat, please correct me if I'm wrong, a social media platform for the Christian community. It's just following one of your lifelong passions. So we're excited to have you joining us today, Pat. So much to get through. I have this giant clock that is ticking down before me with 24 minutes left. So let's just dive right into it. I wanted to talk to you first about China. China is obviously one of our biggest competitors in the AI space. And you were one of the earliest industry leaders who embraced DeepSeek's R1 when it first came out some 2 months ago. There's so many hot takes about DeepSeek these days. I wanted to get your take on what we should be taking away from DeepSeek. And in case, again, for those who are not tracking, DeepSeek is an open weight model that a small, relatively obscure AI company in China released just 2 months ago that literally sent shockwaves through the AI industry. So Pat, some of your opening thoughts.
Great, thank you, and again, truly a pleasure to be there. I posted a blog on DeepSeek, and I said 3 things about it. I said, number one, right, that we have to lower the cost of AI and inferencing in particular. And for that, my sort of thumb in the air is we have to make it like 10,000 times less expensive than it is today. And DeepSeek was driving it. You can call that Jevons law, right? If you're an economist, the gas law. But essentially, as we lower the cost of AI, we're going to expand its use. And I sort of joke, I say, how many of us remember the first time we used the internet? It was like magic. And then it's like, man, I think tomorrow I'm going to go back on the internet, right? Well, now, if your teenager isn't on it every 10 seconds, you've ruined their lives, right? We have to lower its cost so that we make AI fully available. Second, the engineering. Right, and engineering is driven by constraints. You think about some of the great breakthroughs; they had these huge constraints. And I think this also speaks to some of the export law challenges that we have, where fundamentally, they didn't have much compute, so they had to get very, very aggressive in how they engineered around the constraints of the capacity that they had in China. And again, engineering is a business of constraints and how you produce useful results inside of the available resources. And third, open, right? And I deeply believe that AI must be open, right? And we're embedding knowledge, we're embedding values. We have to create and deliver in the open. And somebody who's been associated with the value of open systems for the entirety of my career, generally you come to every one of these decisions and this is the reason we shouldn't make it open. And then, right, you see the power of open, enabling new innovation, enabling transparency, enabling trust. So deeply believe in, those 3 things were the things that really caught the attention of the community.
And just to pull on that thread, that's really our founder, Eric Schmidt, just wrote an article a couple weeks ago positing that the future of the AI competition will really be on 2 axes, US and China on one, and open and closed source on the other. Can you describe some of the trade-offs or some of the benefits that you see in the future of open source and open model weights?
Yeah, and as I think about this, and I've been associated with different open challenges throughout my career, right? And I was in the middle of the USB versus FireWire battle. If any of you can remember that, where Apple was trying to close FireWire. Which one won? USB, it crushed it over time as a result. Wi-Fi, right? Are we going to protect Wi-Fi? I remember, I'm having Senate testimonies on making spectrum open, available, and unlicensed, right? At the time. And, everybody hated me. The service providers hated me because they believed they should have had all of it. The telco, the government hated, all of those different aspects. Open wins, right? And we have Wi-Fi today everywhere. I remember, my first book was the program in the 83, 86. Linus Torvald loved it. Why? Because it published the RTL of the instruction set operation of the 386. And that was then the basis, right, for Linux that we know and love today. Open wins if given the proper opportunity to do so. And I think in this case, the AI models are going to be so important to humanity's future. What are the algorithms inside of the social network platforms? They've taken us to very inappropriate places in society, right? When we have AI is going to be so much more important. So I believe the benefits of open are just going to dominate. Now that doesn't mean that they're available, that everything is done in the open source environment. We have to think about national policy, security, all of those kind of things. But open wins, and our choice has to be open, open, open. For model weights, we're going to be facing licensing questions. What data was used in the training of models as well, right? And are you going to be transparent on that? We have to have proper debates on, how that information is embedded in the model or not, right? And how it's used as part of the operation of the AI systems of the future. So, you're looking at a rabid fan for, the openness of the AI environment. And I do believe there will be competition, challenges, and questions around it, but open wins. And we've seen that over and over and over again through the history of technology.
I want to pivot a little bit to now the hardware side of AI. There's been a lot of news recently regarding the future of the Chips and Science Act. And when you were CEO of Intel, you were a very vocal champion of the Chips and Science Act. So what are some of the pathways forward in the current political climate that we're in right now? How do you see the US rebuilding its domestic semiconductor manufacturing capacity going forward?
Yeah, I think as you heard Senator Warner talk about, it did spark the building cycle of manufacturing in the U.S. again. And first you got to remember, we owned this industry 40 years ago. Why did we lose it, right? It didn't happen overnight. Basically our economic policies no longer rewarded manufacturing investments. Short-termism of Wall Street, said, hey, I want higher margin software. Manufacturing is hard, right? It's heavy. It's long-term capital, right? You have the variability of markets associated with it. So I do think that the CHIPS Act, right, was a catalyst to get started. But the CHIPS Act was designed to be neutralizing the cost comparison with Asia. Neutral doesn't move supply chains, right? If I've been using a supply chain in Asia for 3 decades, just because I can now get an alternative supplier in the US, do I switch my supply chain? Hey, I like my supply chain, right? It's been healthy. It's taken care of my business. And I do think in this sense, the Trump administration coming in and demanding the shift of those supply chains and applying tax, tariffs, and other requirements to move them is an important step as well. So I don't view it as chips versus tariffs. I view it as we have to do both if we're really going to see the supply chains, move back to U.S. soil. If you think about the implications of semiconductors, everything is digital. Everything's becoming more digital, right? The economic implication, and there's a study done by, BCG on this, that shutting down Taiwan has 2x the financial impact of the COVID crisis, greater than the Great Depression. This is not just, national security. This isn't just creating jobs. This is the economic livelihood of the globe. So it is so important, that we see it through. So I view it as chips, for both manufacturing and R&D, which I'm sure we'll touch on a bit more, as well as taxes, tariffs, and other policy to reverse the economics that drove the supply chains away in the first place.
So zooming out then, on the tech strategy level, If you were to go down to the White House tomorrow and make a pitch, what would be your vision? What would be your piece of advice for the White House?
Yeah, and clearly, hey, I think, we must reshore these supply chains, right? 100 kilometers from, China, precarious, they have no energy reserves. We have to fix these supply chains. So I think the priority of that, and as you said, both chips and tariffs or other techniques to go drive that. I do think that, the TSMC investments of last week were great. Not good, they're great. However, TSMC does zero R&D in the U.S., 100% there. And as Andy Grove and Gordon Moore, knew, R&D and manufacturing are part and participle, right, of one process of innovation. And you have to have R&D here. And that's why, Intel and, the R&D capacity that they have remains so critical. And it really breaks my heart to see that not being a stronger piece of the narrative that's going on today. It must be manufacturing and R&D, for the long term. And I do think some of the long-term innovation, one of the companies that I've been super impressed with over the last little bit of time, as I've had a little bit more time to look up a little bit, is X-Light. And if you look inside of the Center of Advanced Lithography, what was the issue? Right, we got stuck at immersion, right, 193 nanometer of light. We saw this LPP, just an engineering marvel that you could ever make it work, right? Plasma creation on a drop of tin, but free electron lasers appear to be able to not just do 13.5 nanometer light, but again, an invention that's been, central to U.S. National Labs for Light, probably allows us to both get much, much higher power. Right, much, 4 times the power at going all the way to 2 nanometer wavelength of light. I think things like that are the long-term R&D and innovation that will allow us to continue to lead. The only way to lead in any industry in a sustainable way is to lead, right? Most of that is led by R&D. It is a worldwide race. You never get defensible. There's no monopoly on ideas, right? There's no monopoly on invention. The only way to do it is to continue to win that race.
So pulling the thread on the R&D piece, what really keeps you excited about what's coming over the horizon, be it in terms of technology writ large or AI specifically?
Yeah, and I do think that, AI, I sort of viewed computing, and I've been in computing now for 45 years. So, it's sort of like we were muddling along, faster memory, crank the Ethernet speed, right? A few more cores, life was boring. And then AI. We went from 500 watts per socket to 1,500 watts per socket overnight. You look at something like NVL72 from NVIDIA, a technological marvel, but a manufacturing nightmare. So we're putting huge pressure on, silicon photonics and optics again to, things that were sort of always sitting there on the side, but never becoming mainstream in the core of the computing fabric. We know that, the memory themselves, fundamentally, NVIDIA is selling the most expensive memory controller that has ever been shipped. Right, it's just sitting here, accessing memory, and so we have to restructure the memory subsystem as well. And then, of course, that lowering the cost of computing, as I said, maybe 10,000x is the right goal to aim for. But then, it's just going to open up new and more understanding of intelligence, new algorithms, new opportunities to research. But that, I think, cracks open the door. I think some of the things going on in quantum computing are thrilling because essentially, most of the world is based on quantum effects. And having a computing model that is looking at quantum mechanics as the fundamental basis for that is going to open up all sorts of new areas, material understanding. Also, as you look at most of the fancy pictures of quantum computers you see today, all you're looking at is a refrigerator. There's a few qubits at the bottom, but you got the big, so now we're starting to see at scale cryogenic performance. And a lot of interesting things happen in material subsystems when you get close to absolute zero. So I think we're going to see a whole set, not just of quantum computing, but of new material science emerging as well. And, one of the companies that I've been, connecting with, there's about 10,000 potential ferroelectric materials. Only 100 have been studied, right? And it's just going to open up enormous fields, the combination of AI, quantum computing. It's not one is going to replace another. When we go into a data center in 2030, we're going to have the quantum corner, right? We'll have the AI corner, the general purpose corner, and they're all going to be operating in, combination. And I think in this regard, some of Whitney's comments, it's not going to be one versus the other. And I really do believe a lot of the advancements will occur riding on the trillions of dollars that have been spent on semiconductors, right? This is just a main, God's gift to humanity is silicon, right? And our ability to bend it, shape it, contort it, right? And add all sorts of things to it.
Yeah, and you've been, what do we call it now, Xing or tweeting on this topic the past couple days, and doubling down on your prediction a while ago that quantum computing would be real by the year 2030. Can you talk a little bit more about what novel breakthroughs semiconductor fabrication will bring to quantum computing, and what problems will quantum computing solve? We just wrapped up a panel just preceding this on quantum, but and I know you saw some of that. If you wanted to add anything to that conversation.
Yeah, and I do think in this regard, part of the reason I'm such a semiconductor advocate, is these trillions of dollars that have gone into it. And if I can get it into silicon in some form, I can make a lot of them, right? Remember all of the different models of quantum computing that have been suggested. And people have a variety of different techniques to be able to form the qubit, right? That they have, and a couple, right? And I'll say psi-quantum, one I quite like, and the Intel approach for spin electrons effects, they're built in silicon. And I know if we can get it to silicon, we can build a lot of them. And everybody understands that we probably need effectively millions of physical qubits to create thousands of useful logical qubits. So I got to build a lot of them. So if you're going to show me an approach that gives me a great way to build 100 physical qubits, I'm bored, right? If you show me something that can scale to millions of physical qubits, I'm excited. And I think that's sort of the thing that's going to, allow it to become. And I think, the Intel programs, the psi-quantum programs, some of the things that you were just hearing about really are focusing on how to build on silicon, which I think will be the magic. But then, of course, what aspect of, of the world and of science today, it's all based on quantum mechanics of some sort. And as we have a quantum computing model that allows us to peer more deeply into that, material subsystems will become accessible. Obviously, I do think that the warfare aspects of security, will drive a lot of it. We've seen over and over again, it's the DARPA, the defense, right? Research partnership. So I do think those will drive a lot of the investments, which I think will be useful. But I think materials, biological systems, I think will be the areas that, the most meaningful areas to improve humanity will emerge from. And I do think that 2030, Jensen said it's 20 more years. I think it's 3 or 4 more years until it's meaningful, useful, and changing industries in fundamental ways.
I want to go back to something you were talking about before, which was just as important as bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., so is maintaining that the nation's R&D lead. What are some things that we can do to ensure that to be the case? And what are some things that you did while you were at Intel to make sure that was the case?
Yeah, I think there's always a level of funding that needs to go for these crazy 30, 40-year projects. And things that are just beyond the economic horizon of commercial interest. And we think about AI. It's been written quite a lot, since the first meeting on AI when it was first described. That's 70 years ago, right? It is a long term, lots of winters that go along the way. We've seen that in so many different fields that it's a 30-year overnight success. 30 painful years of progress and setbacks and understanding. So the long-term R&D. Now, obviously, some of the super companies today, We have long-term R&D that helps offset that. But fundamentally, it's the research communities. Why is the United States the United States? Unparalleled research universities, right? And however they're funded, a lot of that has come, from long-term R&D funding from government sources of one sort to another. But long-term R&D is magic. Second is, if you look at many of these great breakthroughs, they come by foreign nationals. People that were born not in the U.S. I consider myself, of similar ilk, coming from a farming background. I never thought I'd be able to go to university, right? You just have people who are hungry. And if the world wants to send us their best and the brightest, we just need to say yes. Come on in, right? Every time, and I sort of say every PhD program should get stapled with a green card. So we need the best and the brightest. I do think this open discussion that we had earlier, is also an essential aspect, to an innovative society that we have. And I do think the financial systems and the reward mechanisms of Wall Street, need to be fixed. Long-term capital and manufacturing, we can't be viewing that the only way to take something to scale is to get away from America. We have to make it cost-effective, financially viable, long-term, capital, low cost of capital formation for large portions of capital in the U.S.
I want to spend the last couple of minutes that we have together just talking a little bit about your professional and your educational journey. With the fast pace of technology these days, if you were to restart your educational journey, not saying that you want to, but if you could, what academic discipline would you study today?
Yeah, clearly, I'm a math science guy from the word go, and I think that still is the case today. And, as we said, biological systems, material science, understanding the math that goes behind it. If I could, be, 40 years younger, I would want my dorm room to be a cot in a maker lab, right? And you've seen these maker labs, 3D printing machines, different, systems, robotics, et cetera. I would just want to live in one of those maker labs, because so much interesting thing happens when you cross disciplines. You see what's possible to be made. So, to me, that would be the perfect dorm room. It's just a cot in a maker lab, in the center, right? Across disciplinary research, across physics, material science, chemistry, and computing and math. That'd be where I'd want to live. And I think that's sort of the perfect place where I hope my grandkids live.
What about on your professional career, looking back over your decades of experience of being CEOs of multiple companies? What words of wisdom would you bestow on our next generation of tech and industry leaders?
Yeah, well, one of the things I would say is do the right thing. And, one of the things I learned so much from Andy Grove, you're faced with these, tough decisions. And, if the product has a security issue, it's a bug. Don't ship it, right? If its user interface sucks, then you're not done. If it can't be trustworthy, then you're not finished, right? If you haven't shown how, this capability can improve the lives of humanity, then it's not ready to go. Fix it. Do the right thing. I believe deeply in what I call tech for good. Right? Technology itself is neutral. Right? Right? The printing press can, print pornography or can print science papers or the Bible. Right? It's neutral. How do we shape it as a force for good, that truly is improving the lives of every human on the planet? So do what's right, drive technology as a force for good. Be transparent as a leader. You screw up too, right? Why, and, there's enormous power in being able to stand in front of your team and say, man, I want a mulligan on that one, right? I screwed up, and being accountable for that. Andy Grove used to say, the light on the stage gets bigger, right, when you put more people in front of you on the stage. So, right, if there's success, goes to your team. If there's accountability, you own it as a leader. I made it happen. I need to be accountable for that. And finally, man, we are, as technologists, this is the greatest period of history to ever live, right? We are just blowing the doors open. And it is also our responsibility then as technologists to be part of debates like this one. The reason I was excited to join a conversation today, even though I wasn't able to be there in person, was, hey, we're looking at political leaders. We're looking at, all of these individuals to be able to say, hey, make good decisions on technology, right? No, we technologists need to show up. We need to bring our intuition and understanding of the future into the social, political, and legal domain.
No, I can't think of a better way to end our conversation. I'd invite the audience to join me in thanking you, Pat, for sharing your wisdom and your insights with us today. So thank you.